Well, color is as simple as white and black, or white, brown and black, or white, gray and black. But what is race?
What is race?
Now, this race thing has colored our culture and colored the movies.
Is race too complex to be defined? What is acting black? What is acting white? This documentary will examine the social construct of race and what it means to belong to a certain race.
In the book textbook definition, race is determined by color. Color is another word that you can use to describe a race, almost like a synonym. So is race and color one and the same? To me, race is defined by the individual's mind. Race is determined by what a person does, because you might have a Caucasian person acting ghetto or acting outside of their race, or wearing an attire that you don't typically see a Caucasian person wearing, and then you might have an individual the same race that's Caucasian saying, "Why are you acting black?" Or you might have an African American black person who is preppy, who grew up like the Cosbys, or like on Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and then you have somebody that comes in like Will Smith into the scene, from the hood of Philadelphia, and he's automatically judging his cousins just because of what he sees that they're doing. But race is determined by social acceptance.
That was one outlook on the word race. This documentary will feature many different views on the word race in hopes to come up with a better understanding for the way the word is used in today's society.
All right, Niall, spit that.
It's a poem about her life, but Niall Jones is struggling to recite it.
They always called me a white girl. I was never ashamed of myself until they taught me to be ashamed.
Students jokingly say things like, "You must think you're white," or "You're acting white." And even though they're joking, what is acting white, or is there such thing as acting outside of your race?
Okay. I don't necessarily think that there is a such thing as acting white, but I believe that people often associate white tendencies with that certain kind of demographic. So I guess people of white demographic have, tendency to kind of just speak more properly, or say their words thoroughly out, or, just speak a certain way or carry themselves. And people associate those tendencies with that race. And if they see someone else not of that race who have similar tendencies, then they often, use the quotation of acting white. Mm-hmm. But I don't think there's a such thing. If you speak well and you carry yourself well, then you are who you are. There's no such thing. But as I said, people, who just don't really comprehend that concept.
What do you think it is about certain races, so to speak, that make people feel comfortable? Like, I was talking to a professor earlier today, and like the idea that most people in general, whether you're white, black, Hispanic, or whatever, mm-hmm. they feel more comfortable with the ideas of white culture, so to speak. So like, if you're about to make a large purchase and you're going to buy a house or you're going to buy a car, you feel more comfortable doing that with a white person. Or if you walk in for an interview, you feel like you have to change, even though it's considered to be more professional, but most young people, so to speak, see it as white culture, that white is right, so to speak. What do you think about that makes people comfortable?
Right. I think that that's an idea or a construct that we're born with. I have young children. I have a 3-year-old daughter, and she doesn't feel that way. So something happens along the way for us to identify with the majority culture. I think a lot of it has to do with access to things, so that if you want, for example, credit, most likely you're going to go to the bank, you're going to deal with someone who's Caucasian. You're not going to probably see someone who's given out a loan in the bank. More than likely, you're probably going to deal with white established people. So, along those lines, when people are identifying with successful things, and since we have a capitalist society and we want to acquire things, we want to accrue money, and we want to be part of that capitalism, what happens is people start to equate that with, well, those values have attachment to a particular racial group, when they may really just be the values in general, more American values. Acquire things, you go to school, you're going to get a better job, you're going to make more money, you're going to have a nicer life, you're going to have a better car, all those kinds of capitalist ideas. I think they're linked with white America because we were the conduit for access to those things most of the time. I think people who are successful are able to work with different kinds of groups, but I think that's learned. I definitely think that's learned, and it's learned on both sides of the coin, that white kids have to be taught that African American culture and Hispanic culture have value, that their own culture and experiences has value, but African American kids have to see that their culture has value, and white people have a part in that. It's not, yes, this is the way you should be, and that your own culture doesn't have a value.
In recent years, Beyonce has become more and more fair-skinned. This is something that her PR team and the business of entertainment do to promote her image. Do you believe appearance restricts individuals to a certain race?
Well, first of all, I have to say whether or not I agree with the question. Okay. Assuming that what you said is true, which I doubt, because nowadays color makes less of a difference. Now, we still live with this bugaboo that if you're light, you're more attractive, but that's not necessarily the truth any longer. There are a lot of dark-skinned, beautiful, successful people. I don't think it's necessary for Beyonce to be light-complected or lighter than she is in order to be successful.
Do I think that fair skin is something that the entertainment industry is not requiring? I definitely feel like, I don't know, that whole complex is something that's very highly debatable. I feel like it is favored. I do. I feel like it is favored amongst a lot of people, amongst fans and consumers, but at the same time, I feel like if someone has a talent, if someone is talented and they're good at being an entertainer, then that shouldn't matter. But I do feel like it is favored, and I do feel like it's something that's desirable for this day and age, but it should matter. And I think people have different preferences, because you do have artists like Beyonce, but you also have really awesome artists like Kelly Rowland, who's not of her complexion, or you have actresses like Zoe Saldana, who's also Dominican, and she's not fair-skinned, so you have a lot of other people too that are kind of breaking that whole stereotype.
How do you think race affects the psyche of up-and-coming generations about what is beautiful or attractive?
It starts in the household. Parents, of course, need to love their children. They need to tell their children they're handsome or they're beautiful. And then race comes into the picture when you have neighbors or the daycare or the kindergarten class, or those kids start seeing the kids that are not the same race, they start judging. Even with the TV shows, you can see TV shows that even though they're joking, you can see race plays a role because they say he's black or he's white, or white hanging out with that black kid, and you're white, you live behind a white picket fence. Jumping to conclusions is a terrible thing that America's definitely been accustomed to. Individuals jump to conclusions just because of them being a different race, and that's where social acceptance comes in. Just because they're different in color, they're not socially accepted.
With the election of a half African American president, do you think the definition of race has changed since the turn of the 21st century?
Yes, I think the complexity of the issue is an important one, and the election of the first president of the United States that has multi-ethnicity
complex to be defined?
Race, if you look at the definition, I mean, it delves into a lot of things. It's depending on who you really ask. I guess in a sense you can say that it's undefinable, but like I said, if you go door to door, I'm sure somebody would have a completely different answer than me.
Race is not a comfortable discussion. I think there are a lot of people who would not want to have this talk with you today. I do. I think there are some people that it's too charged, it's too sensitive, it's too close to the surface. I think the easy button is to say, let's not talk about it. It doesn't matter. We're moving on. We're postmodern. We have an African American president who had a Caucasian mother, and we can move into this next era. And I don't know that we can stop the conversation there.
Some people seem to think that they belong to a human race, which is true to some extent. But if we belong to a human race, then the election of a black president wouldn't be a topic of discussion. Is race too complex to be defined?
Well, first of all, I think there's no doubt that we belong to the human race.
Right.
We all do, you know. That's totally true. Now, do I think, what now, that race is too complicated?
Complex to be defined.
How do you choose to define it? By color. In South Africa, they're blacks, they're colored, they're Whites. I mean, you know, they break it down to 3 categories, you know. And it has to do with skin color, you know. Race became an issue when slavery became a fact, all right? Prior to that, they talked about black people. They spoke of the Egyptians, okay, or anyone from the part of the world where people were dark, or people who came from northern European countries. They were called what they were, Gauls or whatever, you know. So the whole idea of race, even among Africans who fought each other, tribal conflict and all that, it wasn't based on color. They were of the same race. So slavery became a racial thing when they started bringing people from Africa. And when they wanted to define someone as subhuman because of his color to justify the conditions that they put these people into, then color became, and then the variations in color became something that people talked about.
It's a great milestone, but I don't think it's the end of the conversation. Where we've been, certainly, but where we are going, where we're needing to be.
As you can see, this documentary includes interviews from people of different ethnic backgrounds. Each one of these people defined race totally differently.
I was never ashamed of myself until they taught me to be ashamed, but I refuse to be defined by it either.
Or will it define you?